Anthropic just dropped the most powerful model that regular people can actually use. It's called Fable 5. And it's so careful and so locked down that if you ask it the wrong thing, it will stop, tap out, and hand you over to a different model mid-task. I was actually watching another video where somebody was trying to use Fable 5 to do research to create his video, and when he asked about the cybersecurity aspect of it, it actually dropped down to Opus 4.8 and said, "Can't help you, buddy, sorry." I think that's actually kind of hilarious. So, what is it about this model that makes it so jumpy? And is there still a place for it in your workflow? Let's go take a look. So Anthropic has had their Mythos model out for a while now, but it's so powerful that they've had it locked down and it's been available only to people in a trusted partnership program called Project Glasswing. But that just changed. Anthropic updated the Mythos model, named it Mythos 5, and added a bunch of guardrails and created a new model with those guardrails. And that model is called Fable 5, and that's what we're talking about today. But it's important to know Fable 5 and Mythos 5 are the same model under the hood. It's just that the Fable model has guardrails on it. And not surprisingly, the Mythos Fable 5 family of models is the state-of-the-art model available now. This thing is really powerful. But they do mention that with that power comes some risks. But in order to mitigate those risks and release a version of this model to the rest of us safely and quickly, they've added some safeguards and they made them extremely conservative. They do say they will sometimes trigger on a false positive, but they're saying it only happens in less than 5% of sessions. However, they are opening it up to the public. I have a feeling they're going to trigger a lot more frequently from here on out. But do know, if you're asking about cybersecurity, biology, chemistry, anything medical related, it's possible it could trigger that safeguard and it will just fail you back to the Opus 4.8 model. That said, there is a truly enormous jump in a couple of these numbers. Agentic coding went up almost 10 percentage points. That's huge. But the real power for the rest of us is how much longer they can work autonomously. They're basically saying these models, the Fable 5 that's available to the general public and Mythos 5, can work autonomously for hours and hours. So these are really built to handle those enormous projects where you know there's going to be hours and hours of coding. You should be able to hand some of those projects to the Fable 5 model and just let it go to work. Now, they are saying it's more token efficient than past Claude models, but it's important to know that the tokens are about twice as expensive as the Opus 4.8 model. So I'll let you do the math on that. Gain in efficiency, tokens cost twice as much, so it's not going to be a one-to-one trade-off. Those costs are going to add up. But sometimes you get what you pay for. And a quick note on that pricing. I asked Claude to take a look at the historical pricing of the Opus model, just for comparison's sake. And it is really interesting to point out that when Opus was first released, the pricing was $15 in, $75 out per million tokens. And a few months after they released it, they dropped the pricing dramatically, down to $5 in, $25 out. And so while currently Fable is priced twice as much as the current Opus model, it's interesting to note that Fable is still far less expensive now than the Opus model was when it first came out. Now, obviously, that's not exactly an apples to apples comparison because we do know that the Fable model uses tokens, according to Claude, when you first log in, at about twice the rate as Opus. But it is also far more accurate at a much lower rate of effort. So there is some real trade-off going there. And so I think the point is this model is definitely not for everyday use, but for some uses, you are going to get quite a bit more bang for your buck than even the current pricing of the Opus model. One of those things that you get is memory and long context. They are saying that Fable 5 can stay focused across millions of tokens in a long-running tasks and improves its outputs using its own notes. They handed the model the deck building game Slay the Spire, and it improved its performance versus Opus 4.8 by 3 times. The Fable model was also able to reach the game's final act 3 times more often. So that right there is impressive. A couple of things that they also highlight is using the Mythos 5 model, they were able to accelerate aspects of the drug design process by around 10 times. I'm not going to pretend like I understand this, but look, I think that's an impressive picture. They've also reported novel hypotheses in molecular biology and novel research in genomics. So this is the kind of thing that we were promised in the beginning of AI helping with medical breakthroughs and scientific discovery. This is the good news part of AI, and it's pretty exciting. They even intend to publish the results of some of this novel research. That's impressive. So who has access? If you have a paid subscription, you have access to it starting today, but only through June 22nd. After that, they're going to take it out of the plan. After that, you can use it, but you'll need to use your usage credits. They do say that if they have capacity, they'll add it back into the subscriptions. But they don't have a timeline for that, and I think it is just dependent on, as always, usage and capacity and what the response is. So there's no guarantees. So we've got about 2 weeks to give this thing a test and kick its tires. So that's what I did. I don't do big enterprise type of projects. I'm certainly not doing scientific research. So I've been working on trying to build a benchmark that might reflect better where models would fit in for me in my workflow. This is still a work in progress, but it has been interesting at what is revealed for some of the other models. It's definitely not perfect, and most of the tests are pretty simple. 3 of them are subjective. A couple of them are actual coding type tasks. There's a fake package that I ask it to find a Python package and use that. And depending on the response, it might hallucinate, it might fabricate, it might catch it and solve it. You can see that both the Fable and the Opus model caught it and solved it. Same thing with, there's a regular expression validator. Fable and Opus performed exactly the same on these. That's not super surprising. These are relatively simple tests, but I have been surprised in the past by the Sonnet and the Gemini models, some of their behavior. So this was actually good to see that it sort of behaved as expected. So moving on to these more subjective tasks, this is where it did get a little bit interesting. This is the astronaut riding a humpback whale. This one is Fable 5. This is Opus 4.8. And I do have to say, I think the Fable 5 model did do a better job. There is a lot more detail in here. Even the way the human is kind of put together is a little bit more realistic than this sort of splayed out, I don't know, spider monkey astronaut over here. I wouldn't say there's an enormous difference. They're both recognizable as an astronaut, a whale, and space. So there's not a huge difference here. I think I'd say the same thing with the CRT clock. I think the Fable 5 version is slightly more detailed. There's a pin holding the hands here in the middle that's maybe a little bit more realistic. And I think it's a little bit more detailed with all the tick marks around the edges. But overall, it hit all the marks. It's got a sweeping hour hand. There's kind of some ghosting behind it. And there was a very specific details about how to render incorrectly the Roman numerals to give it 4 I's instead of IV for the number 4 here. Again, subjective, but I think Fable 5 is slightly better. And then finally, the cool thing task. This one's definitely subjective. Here's the Fable 5 version. You can basically send planets on an orbit around a sun. You can collide them, you can have them smash into each other. It doesn't do a lot, but it is very well done. It's very crisp and clean looking. Actually looks pretty professional. The Opus 4.8 is Living Ink Flow Field. This one also just kind of fun to look at. I think they both hit the mark of, give me something cool. So the thing that's left to ask about is the cost. And I think that really brings home the difference between the two models. Yes, Fable 5 did a slightly better astronaut and maybe the clock too, but it did cost over twice as much. It used more tokens. Most of them were cached, so that's not really a big deal. But overall, it was just a lot more expensive. And honestly, I don't think for the kind of day-to-day bookkeeping sort of tasks that I'm asking for, I would be reaching for this model. Anthropic obviously gives us this ladder of models, and it even kind of spells out when you might reach for each one. Fable is for your hardest and longest running tasks. Sonnet is really more for your day-to-day. Opus is better at complex reasoning. And then there's Haiku if you want something fast and efficient. So this is not an all or nothing. This is giving us yet another option in this suite of tools that we have available. And so that's the beauty of this. Because even while I was researching for this video and talking to other people to see how they're using this model, it kind of dawned on me, yeah, I don't have any enterprise level products and I'm not doing scientific research, but I do have a website that is really due for an overhaul. And I do have a couple of projects that kind of need either a ground up refresh or just a complete start. And I think this is the model that I can give it a goal and say, go to work on this and just walk away and come back and see what it's done. That's the kind of big project that is in my world that I can use it for. And so I think this 2-week window is the perfect opportunity to give it a shot. Now, I have heard people say that it uses tokens very quickly, so you might run out of tokens before you know it. If you have critical tasks that need to get done, definitely want to work on those before you go and run through your tokens with the Fable model. So if you're a subscriber to Claude Code and you have a project or two that maybe needs an overhaul and you've got a few extra tokens on your hands, now is the time to pull out the new Fable model and kick its tires and see what it can do. If you give it a goal and it comes back with something good, drop a note in the comments and let me know. I'm really curious to hear what people are going to be using this for going forward. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.